Machu Picchu by Dr. Sarah Scherer. A royal estate. Machu Picchu is often described as mysterious, but in fact a great deal is known about its construction and purpose. Machu Picchu is a very famous Incan city and archaeological site. It was built as a royal estate for the first Inca emperor Pachacuti in the middle of the 15th century. It is located on a mountain saddle overlooking the Urubamba River. The location is approximately a 3 days walk from the Inca capital city of Cusco. The location of Machu Picchu was a perfect retreat for the emperor because it is nearly 3,000 feet lower in elevation than Cusco, and it has a pleasant climate. It was intended as a place where the Inca emperor and his family could host feasts, perform religious ceremonies, and administer the affairs of the empire. The site of Machu Picchu was chosen for its relationship to the Andean landscape, including sightlines to other mountain peaks. The Incans saw the mountain peaks as significant and connected them with their gods. Machu Picchu contained housing for elites, royal servants, and maintenance staff, religious shrines, fountains, and terraces, as well as carved rock outcrops, a signature element of Inca architecture. Machu Picchu has incredible examples of Incan architecture. It features architecture that was built by carefully fitting individual stones against each other. Machu Picchu also has many terraces. Terraces are the steps carved into hillsides, and they were a common element of highland agriculture, farming, long before the Inca. Terraces increased the land's surface area and reduced erosion by creating walled steps down the sides of steep mountains. Each step could then be planted with crops. Terracing took advantage of the landscape and provided food for the emperor and his entourage during visits. At Machu Picchu, Incan engineers were also very strategic about how they built the city to protect it from flooding and to provide water to the people living there. Throughout Machu Picchu, there are a system of stone channels that drain water from rainfall away from the city. There's also a natural spring near the site, which the Incas intelligently channeled into stone fountains. There are 16 fountains located throughout the city that are fed by this spring. The construction of the main buildings in Machu Picchu is typical of Inca elite architecture. The walls of the buildings were built of stone that had been individually shaped to fit closely with one another. This was accomplished by a laborious process of shaping the stones with tools, gradually shaping them so that each stone was uniquely nested against those around it. Each stone had some sides that protruded slightly and some with slightly concave faces. When these stones were put together, they held very securely. Outward stone faces were then worked smooth so that the walls resembled an intricate mosaic. Most structures were roofed with wood and thatch. Entryways were unique in the unique Inca shape of a trapezoid rather than a rectangle. The trapezoid shape was also used for niches and windows in the walls of buildings. Buildings for people or activities of lower status were made using rough construction techniques that did not take the time to shape the stones. Population and social dynamics. The emperor and his servants would only reside at Machu Picchu for part of the year. Most of the people who lived there permanently were groundskeepers and craftspeople. The buildings of Machu Picchu clearly show the social divisions of the site, with most of the high-status residential buildings in a cluster to the northeast. The emperor himself lived in a separate compound at the southwest of the site, indicating his unique status as the ruler. The observatory is next to the royal residence, emphasizing the relationship between the elites, religious rituals, and the importance of astronomy. One of the obligations of the royal family was performing rituals that sustained relationships with the Incan gods. The number of religious structures at Machu Picchu is high, indicating that Pachacuti and his lineage were heavily involved in the religious functions of the empire. Observatory. The observatory, also called the Temple of the Sun, is a temple and a place used to study the stars. The building is built in a unique shape. It is composed of two main parts: an upper curved stone enclosure with windows and niches placed in it, and a cave beneath the structure with masonry additions that hold more niches. Modifications to the windows in the observatory's upper walls indicate that they were used to calculate the June solstice, as well as the first morning rise of the constellation Pleiades and other important constellations. The cave beneath the enclosure may refer to the place of the underworld in the Inca myth, making the observatory a building that embodied cosmological thought as much as it facilitated astronomical observation. Intihuatana. The Intihuatana, also known as the hitching post of the sun, is a carved boulder located in the ritual area of the site to the west of the main plaza. Carved boulders were part of the Inca relationship with the earth and expressions of belief in a landscape inhibited by supernatural forces. Carved boulders of this type are found throughout the heart of the Incan Empire. The stone's name refers to the idea that it was used to track the movement of the sun throughout the year, part of the reckoning of time used to determine when religious events would take place, and similar to the observatory.